Today at Millstone Firewood, we've got a new tool for the shop. We're going to get it unboxed and set up. We have an Oregon 620-120 bench mount chain sharpener. Okay. The reason I got this is mainly because I've been having a lot of trouble consistently sharpening my saw blades. The biggest problem I've been having is inconsistent lengths of the individual teeth and matching the rakers. So everything on the blade has to match. And this is stuff that I didn't know before, and it's taken me a while to figure it out. Way back in the 1980s, I was a kid then, my dad had an old, well, no, he had a new Homelite chainsaw, and we spent a lot of time cutting firewood with this. I have some very fond memories of working with my dad and using that saw. Anyway, it's hard to believe, but I have been sharpening chainsaw chains by hand with a file for over 40 years. I don't even know where did the time go. But that's a long time to be doing it with a file. I don't know, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I finally bought an Oregon electric grinder. Now, that was the hand grinder that you use, kind of like a Dremel tool. And that was a huge upgrade for me. For the most part, I was successful sharpening blades that way. I really didn't have anybody to teach me how to do it properly. My dad taught me the basics, which essentially came out of the chainsaw operator's manual, for whatever that was worth. So he was not really an expert. So consequently, I was not an expert at it. I learned mostly by trial and error, and I mean a lot of error. Whenever I was cutting with the chainsaw, I was always very careful to not hit the ground or cut into anything like fence wire or nails or whatever might be stuck in the wood, or, you know, touching the ground with the saw was always bad. So I was always really careful about that. It happens, and it's unavoidable. Sooner or later, you're going to hit something. You're going to touch a rock. You're going to touch a nail. If it was just routine sharpening, using the file and just touching up the blade, that worked fine because you're only taking, you know, a little bit off of each tooth, and it was not a big deal. Back then, I had no idea what those rakers were for. If I did manage to hit something like a rock, then I really had problems because the touch-up sharpening that I was doing with a file was insufficient. And it was wrong. It was just wrong, the wrong way to do it. Mostly because I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't understand the geometry of the saw chain and how everything ties together. So what would happen is I would sharpen this damaged chain, and I would have very inconsistent results. The chain would cut slowly, maybe not cut at all. It would grab, it would get stuck in the cut. The worst thing was cutting around a corner. So instead of cutting straight down, it would cut at an angle. And that drove me crazy. I had no idea what was causing that. I have a small Stihl MS-170, I think it is. And that thing, you know, it's got a real small blade on it. I think it's an 1/8" blade. I could cut through a small diameter log, no problem. But when I went to cut through anything larger, it would get halfway through the log and it would just stop. It just wouldn't, the saw blade would not advance any further. And I could not figure out what was going on. And I looked at it. I pulled my hair out for that. Now I finally understand. When I got my Firewood processor, which has a 404 pitch harvester blade, I was really forced to learn how to do the sharpening properly, to stop thinking that I knew what the hell I was doing. The more I sharpened the harvester saw, the more I realized something isn't right. So as I'm using the firewood processor, everything's going great. And then if I get into like a log that's got some mud on it or little stones, it starts slowing down. So eventually I have to stop and resharpen it. I would take my new hand grinder and I would touch up each tooth, and that was great. Then the saw would be pretty much back to normal and start cutting good again. The other day I was doing an on-site job, and as I was cutting, I cut through a knot in one of the logs. Well, inside the knot, there was a rock. That pretty much was a showstopper. The saw screamed when I hit that rock, and of course it would not cut anymore because it was in a rock. So I had to stop what I was doing and try to sharpen the blade. So now here I have a blade that is thoroughly and severely damaged by this rock. So I start grinding with my little hand grinder. Now I've got some teeth that just needed a little touch up and other teeth that needed a lot of material removed. That's the problem. All the teeth have to be sharpened to the same length. In addition to that, the rakers have to be adjusted to match the length of the tooth. So the top of the tooth and the top of the raker, that's a 50 thousandths gap. Again, I didn't know, I knew that part, but I didn't realize how critical this was. And I mean critical. The harvester saw is no joke. That thing will cut through an 18-inch diameter log in seconds, which is pretty amazing, but it has to be sharp. I started watching YouTube videos, and there was lots of information out there. Good information, bad information, incomplete information. That was the bulk of it. I finally found documents from Oregon and from Stihl on properly sharpening a blade. And when I read these, it was eye-opening. I finally realized just how much I didn't know about doing this. It's a lot more complex than I had originally ever thought. So after doing a bunch of reading and rereading and trying to make it stick, I was able to get a much better grasp on the whole sharpening process. And I will put a link down in the description for those two documents if you want to look at them. I'm going to be doing another video on actually sharpening the saw blades. Today, this is merely just unboxing and getting this set up and kind of figured out, read the manual, try to learn about it. All right, so we're going to get this unboxed and see what's in here. This is going to it's exciting for me because honestly, I've always wanted one of these. I haven't been able to afford one until I started selling firewood, and now the firewood business is paying for this kind of stuff. So that's really good. I also wanted to mention that I make every attempt to respond to every comment that you guys make on my videos, and I do appreciate you making comments. All right, we have what appears to be the operator's manual. We have, I do believe, these feel like grinding wheels. Yes, these are grinding wheels. We'll open those up in a minute. Don't know what's in here. Something is in there. So this is, okay, we got a handle, we've got a gauge. Looks like a dressing brick. All right, that's great. I'm gonna pull all that stuff aside there. Well, this is interesting. You can see this. What does that say on there? Tecomec. That's very interesting. I've seen Tecomec products on eBay, and they looked like they were some quality products. All right, get this out of here. That looks like more empty packaging. Okay, I think we can safely move the box out of the way. And I do apologize for the bad camera angles. I'm doing this by myself, and I need two hands. The video is being done off of a tripod, so I'm trying to get it positioned so you guys can see what's going on here. Alright, plastic bag is off. Okay, here it is. The hinge is tied down with a zip tie, a big zip tie. Obviously, we're going to have to mount this to a bench. Alright, I'm going to open the operator's manual and look at the setup procedure for this before I go any farther. So the turkey has decided to come in and help me set up the bench grinder. Hi, turkey. So here's our manual. So according to this, it says it's already completely assembled, except for the handle, apparently. And they want you to mount this on a bench 1.2 to 1.3 meters off the floor. Bench or wall mount. Well, I don't have any wall space here, so it's going to be bench mount. And I think I'm probably going to wind up making a stand, which I may have to do before I can do anything else. Alright, so in the back of the book are all of these diagrams that show you how to set it up, all the parts, testing your grinding wheel to make sure it's doesn't have a crack in it, mounting instructions, bench mount or wall mount, mounting the handle, and then over here we get into the parts of a chain link or a chain tooth, the chain, the gauge. This looks pretty good. There's a lot of information here. According to the documentation here, securing the operating handle, that's this. Completely screw the operating handle I7 on the screw V7. I'm not trying to nitpick here, but I don't know what they're referring to. The figures in the back of the manual don't really match anything, except, I don't know. As I go along here, I'll figure it out, I'm sure. But this is figure 2, number 7. That's the operating handle. The screw, which is protruding, well, not protruding anymore. Oh, here we go. Ah, number 6. It doesn't reference that anywhere. Screw and handle. So we're just going to screw this on. That's what I'm doing right now. The handle is not threaded. It's just straight plastic. So the screw is cutting the threads as I go here. That's it for assembly. Now I need to put this thing on a stand. So without getting too carried away, I built a little stand. I already had the base, which is just a stand that I use for when I'm cutting metal. So I just got another piece of pipe and I welded a plate on. And this comes with 2 M8 bolts. Fits right down through. They give you 2 bolts, but there's 3 holes. So I'm not sure what that's all about. I guess they figure you don't need that 3rd bolt. I put a hole there anyway in the plate, just in case. So I had to take the grinder off of its base in order to properly line these holes up. Now that that's done, I'm going to tighten these down, and then we'll put the grinder back on its base and see how the stand works. Now we'll put this back on right here. That, and then this one actually has a spring under here. It is set up. Looks like there's already hydraulic fluid in the little ram here. I'm guessing this must be the reservoir over here. But that's all done. I don't have to do any of that. Now the next thing is going to be putting a grinding wheel on. So pull out a grinding wheel, check it, and then mount it. So this wheel is designed for adjusting the rakers. So it's got a square profile. This is a 1/8 wheel. You're supposed to hold the wheel and hit it with the screwdriver. Okay. It makes a ringing sound, and that's what you want. If it makes a dull clunk, that means the wheel is cracked. Do not install a cracked wheel. You will regret it, because a cracked wheel, first time you go to use it, even when you just turn it on, it can come apart. And believe me, having a piece of grinding wheel slam into you is not fun. Okay, now we need to read the instructions again and figure out how exactly to mount this. We loosen this cover. Put that aside. Then we have to loosen the mounting flange. Now, how do you do that? How do you lock it in place? There wasn't any big secret to this. I just took my fingers and put them behind the flange and held onto it as tight as I could, and it came loose. Seems to me that there would be like an index hole or something that you could put a pin in to lock it down, but I don't know. That just seems to be all there is. Okay, so the flange is off. This flange also comes off. Let's just look at it for a second. Yeah, it's just a flange. There's no way to lock the motor while you're doing that, so I don't know how they expect you to properly tighten it, but I guess we'll find out here in a minute. So put that back on. Now we center the wheel. Let's see. These do not appear to be directional. Okay. There's that. And now we'll put the flange back on. It's important to make sure that the wheel is perfectly centered around this flange, the inner flange. Now we can tighten it, but this time I have to hold on to the wheel. I actually did have a torque wrench that would adjust to that. It's 7 Newton meters. I don't know why I said 11, but it's 7 Newton meters that you have to tighten it to. And it says that right there. Now the grinding wheel's mounted. We'll put this cover back, and that wheel should run true. If it's running out, that's not good. So I think now we can actually turn this on. It also says to stand to the side, which is a good idea when you turn it on the first time. And start it and let it run for a minute. So there we go. We're going to let that run. And that'll make sure the wheel doesn't come flying apart. So we'll let that run for a minute and then we'll be back. Now I've put a chain in the vise. Ran a little test grind on this. This was the chain that was really badly damaged, so I figured to do it on this one in case I messed it up, but it looks fine. Another thing I wanted to point out, this grinder comes with 2 of the chain stops. One is significantly shorter than the other. The shorter one is for standard chainsaw chains. The longer one is for the larger harvester type chains. The main difference is there's more clearance under here. Make sure when you go to sharpen a chain that you've got the right chain stop installed. I got myself a magnetic base sewing machine lamp. I think that's what they call them. So I just stick it on. You can't stick it to the frame here because the frame's aluminum. So I just put it underneath. Make sure the magnet's fully on there so it doesn't collect grinding dirt. And that gives you light all the time. Otherwise, the only time you get light is when you pull the arm down or turn the motor on, rather. So it's okay, but it's not ideal. This really helps a lot to see what you're doing, especially during setup. Okay, that's it for doing the setup. Watch for my next video where I actually repair and sharpen some chains. And we'll see you later. Thanks for watching.